And tonight, Republicans play hardball over the Hillary Clinton email controversy. Senator Rand Paul is back in Congress, doing something he does quite well, filibustering. We'll tell you why. Rick Unger heads to the Ed Sullivan Theater to talk to Letterman fans and has the inside dirt on some surprise guests. We talk about all that and more, plus yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap live from New York City. And tonight in the Wrap, he is my co-host and Sirius XM radio host, Rick Unger, back from the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Back from the Ed Sullivan Theater.
And to his right, television personality and editor of Jane Unchained, Jane Velez Mitchell, back in the middle seat once again. And finally, he's an author, he's a spiritual leader, he's the editor of the Wisdom Daily. He stays busy. He is Brad Hirschfield, and he's back as well.
I am. Glad to be
here, sir. Let's go right to the Daily Download. And Republicans have a new tactic in taking on the Hillary email controversy. They're threatening to cut off State Department funding, and they will subpoena a longtime Clinton ally, Texas Congresswoman Kay Granger, who chairs a subcommittee that oversees State Department funding, tells The Hill that some money could be held back unless Republicans get more cooperation. Republicans have been trying to get more documents, including emails about the deadly Benghazi attack. Granger wasn't specific on where the cuts would be made, but a source tells The Hill that embassy security would not be affected. Rick, is this move politically savvy, or are we looking at the next Ken Starr moment of overplaying one's hand?
You asked that question beautifully. It's ridiculous. I mean, and you know, it's not the first time. A few months ago, they did the same thing with the Pentagon when they weren't happy with some information they wanted there. I don't know how to break this to the Republicans in the House, but the Pentagon, the State Department, they don't just work for Democrats. They work for everybody. You want to shut them down? Go get them, kids, because this is going to be a lot of fun.
Again, we see the Clintons, they make a mistake. Clearly, we all agree here that having one server in one's basement when you work for the State Department, you run it, probably isn't a good idea. But now, if the Republicans do something like this, and Rick and I actually agree on this, this will only somehow play to their advantage.
They're giving the Salem witch trials a run for their money. They are threatening to cripple the U.S. State Department so they can conduct a witch hunt on a woman who has presidential aspirations. This borders on bullying. They're acting like she's the one who killed the ambassador. I mean, really, they have to put this into context, and they have to understand that most Americans, if you quiz them on Benghazi, are not going to come up with a lot of information. So I don't think this drumbeat of Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi is going to really resonate with the voters. I think this is going to backfire in a big way.
One thing I strive for on this show is not to have an echo chamber. So please tell me that you're not going to agree at different degrees. I'm not quite where Jane is, but
I'm not going to agree completely, because we had murder, witch hunt, bullying.
Yeah, I'm not there.
Let's not get carried away.
I'm not there.
I actually understand and agree with the impulse to do this. Where I do agree with Rick is that it's stupid. How are they going to find the bright line that's going to protect national security, which they pledge to do no matter what, and simply punish the State Department and the Department of Defense in ways that they can be certain won't? Not to mention that it's never going to pass as law. They should stop doing that. Don't let someone who deserves to be held accountable play the victim card. Get this stuff out there, find out the truth, and move forward.
It just shows how frustrated they are.
Yeah, it's showing, and there's so much time before the election.
Yeah, it's great.
Right?
Love it.
It's great. Listen to you.
Love it.
Great. I'm rooting for these sort of things here. Anyway, just yesterday, a federal judge ordered the State Department to speed up the release of some 55,000 emails. How does somebody send that many? I have to check my sent items box sometime. And then turn them over in a rolling fashion. The State Department's initial plan was to release all of the vetted emails by January of next year. Meanwhile, longtime Clinton confidant Sidney Blumenthal has been subpoenaed by the Benghazi Committee. No surprise there. The New York Times reporting earlier this week that Blumenthal had written then Secretary Clinton a host of emails about Libya before and after the death of Muammar Gaddafi. Just yesterday, Clinton defended her relationship with Sid.
He's been a friend of mine for a long time. He sent me unsolicited emails, which I passed on in some instances, and I see that that's just part of the give and take. When you're in the public eye, when you're in an official position, I think you do have to work to make sure you're not caught in a bubble and you only hear from a certain small group of people. And I'm going to keep talking to my old friends, whoever they are.
If they're old friends, though, then why are the emails unsolicited? Aha! Blumenthal was a White House aide during Bill Clinton's presidency, Brad. Benghazi will not go away. Where is this going to lead?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. She wants to get out of the bubble by talking to her old friends. I mean, that's why it's not going to go away. Because if she can't come clean, which she seems biologically incapable of doing, it's going to keep coming back to haunt her. Could it go away? Yes. But they would have to be un-Clintonian to make it go away. Even the New York Times, which loves the Clintons, said this story represents, once again, the intersection of politics, philanthropy, and business in ways that continue to vex the Clintons. I would only add a couple of words, and to enrich them. And I think that's part of the story. So she's going to have to come clean more than she wants to.
Last I heard, the New York Times is not exactly a conservative
but you know,
organization.
a lot of supposition by my friend down there. Look, I got an email today from an old buddy, and he actually gave me some advice, and I sent him back a note and said, don't send me that email. You might get subpoenaed.
So Lincoln wasn't shot in that theater?
Yeah, apparently not.
Wow.
And you're the Secretary of State?
Since when? So what? Since when can't the Secretary of State get an email from a friend? This is going one step
Not just any
too
friend,
far.
a friend who wasn't even allowed to work for the State Department.
That doesn't really matter. He's still a friend of hers, and he's a brilliant guy, by the way. He wasn't allowed to work for the State Department, not because of any history, because he was an enemy of the Obama people. They didn't like him because of the campaign. That's why. So this is all very, very silly. Republicans going one step too far again, ruining a good thing, but keep it up, guys.
And talk about getting advice. What about Jeb Bush admitting that he gets advice from his brother?
Why shouldn't he?
Well, because his brother basically was the engineer of the most disastrous invasion based on false pretenses
that Hillary Clinton voted for.
Yeah, she voted for it, but she didn't. She wasn't the architect of it. So the idea that Jeb Bush, who would also like to be president, is getting advice from George is absolutely, I think, much more damning than Hillary Clinton getting advice from somebody
I
who has
actually don't agree with that.
I'm with you on this one.
Yeah.
Get advice, get it from wherever you want.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Don't hide it on servers people don't know about. And don't get advice from people without disclosing they have business interests while they're advising you on security.
And then don't destroy the server in the process.
So that's it.
Wait a
Otherwise,
second.
hold them accountable.
You know what?
And you're
But
right.
you
The
know what?
Blumenthal thing is, to be fair,
And it's
he was
baloney.
held out of the Obama administration for personal
And
reasons.
had she taken his advice and ordered people in the State Department to act on it, you'd be right. But she didn't. She passed it around to say, what do you guys think of this? And you know what they said? We don't agree with him, and that was that.
selective indignation.
And speaking of Libya, former Obama Defense Secretary Robert Gates tells CNN that Clinton was wrong in her effort to oust Muammar Gaddafi.
And the irony is that some of those who are the most critical of President Bush for not having a plan in Iraq after Saddam Hussein was ousted didn't have a plan for what to do in Libya after Gaddafi was ousted.
All right, he said Gaddafi. We were debating during that soundbite whether it's Gaddafi or Gaddafi. Anyway, and with terror groups taking advantage of the power vacuum in Libya, Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans were killed in the Benghazi attack that we all know about, a little over a year after the death of said Gaddafi. Rick, on one hand, Democrats criticize the ousting of Saddam Hussein. Now Gates is criticizing the ouster of Gaddafi. Can you equate the two?
I don't know if I can equate them, but I actually think Gates is right. I think it's fair to point out, though, that Gates said that in the context of saying that he and Hillary Clinton actually agreed on almost everything when he was at Defense and she was at State. This was the one thing he disagreed with. You know, you got to look at what the result was, and it looks like he was right. So you're not going to be right on everything. What are you going to do?
He also criticized President Obama for moving the troops out of Iraq, and I think the whole fundamentally flawed aspect of this is that we can control what's happening in other countries. Do you know how difficult it is to change one person? Think of a relative who may have a bad habit, but we're going to go in there
relative?
and maybe many relatives. We're going to go there and engage in nation building and do democracy at the point of a gun. It never works, and it's a big mess, and it should teach us a lesson to stay out of it.
The lesson can be learned on The Sopranos. Follow me for a second.
I'm with you.
Because everybody wanted Tony to take out the New York crime leader, right? And Tony kept saying, but we don't know who will replace him. And then sure enough, the guy who replaced Johnny Sack was Phil Lombardo, and he was twice as bad. So I think that's, whether it's Gaddafi, whether it's Hussein, bad people, but the vacuum can bring in worse.
Look, you're right. And for all of the best reasons, we are deeply optimistic. But it turns out that kind of nation building doesn't work.
Does not work, and I have a feeling we won't be seeing it anytime soon. Coming up next, Senator Rand Paul is Billy filibustering again, and we'll tell you why next.
Comes a time in the history of nations when fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged.
And with that, Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky and 2016 candidate, began his filibuster of the Patriot Act. He wants to block a vote on any bill that would extend said Patriot Act and allows spy agencies to continue collecting Americans' phone data. Really?
We're at a point now where we have enormous bulk collection, enormous collection of American citizens' data, one program we know almost nothing about, and yet it goes on with no debate.
And fellow Kentucky Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is in favor of renewing the Patriot Act, arguing that claims of government overreach are unfounded. 2016 contender Marco Rubio, who isn't, is also in McConnell's camp. 2016 rival Ted Cruz agrees with Paul. There is strong support among Republicans and Democrats for extensive reform to the program, but few want it to expire altogether. In what might surprise some, the Tea Party Patriots and the ACLU are teaming up to call for an end of warrantless bulk collection of American phone calls and data. Can't wait to hear what Jane thinks about this. Is it time for the NSA? Who do you agree with? The Tea Party Patriots or with Rand Paul?
I agree with Rand Paul, and I think that this is, his libertarian impulse to say that this is our freedom that's being compromised. The right to bear arms was all about giving militias the chance to defend themselves against a totalitarian force, and it's not going to happen with street fights and gun battles. It's going to happen with them collecting all this data and having complete control over us, and then wait to the point where all of a sudden all the cash and everything is on here, and they have all control of us, and then they could declare a totalitarian society without firing one shot. So I agree with him.
Wow, you really you need more passion. That's your problem.
Was I
on the air? No, that was
good.
It was excellent. I may not have necessarily agreed with it, but what about the security aspect?
Well, that's the point. I think my rule of thumb is if the Tea Party and the ACLU are in lockstep agreement about something, it's time to back up, right? Because these are both groups that have a theoretical commitment, which even when the theory is right, they pay no attention to pragmatic reality. The truth of the matter is we do all kinds of things in the midst of battle when the enemy is upon us. Now, we can't do it from fear. There, Rand Paul is correct. You can peddle terror in ways that will erode liberty. But if we're serious, there really is a war on terror going on. We have to be grown up enough to say certain liberties will be curtailed, not canceled, and have to have the appropriate judicial oversight. But the idea, again, ACLU, Tea Party, same page, that's not good.
Interesting. Where do you lie here?
Well, first of all, I would say that when the Tea Party and the ACLU get together, we ought to be paying attention.
I agree.
That's what I would say.
Just not good.
And this is why I find Rand Paul so fascinating. It's like for every 2 articles I write about him where I'm beating him up for some reason, I'll write a third one where I'm complimenting him because he does some things like this.
Well, he is principled.
That he is. He's a fascinating guy. Look, I think that his concern is absolutely legitimate. I agree with you that you have to be mindful and willing to do some things. The problem is, if we look at the history of this data collection, there is not the judicial intervention, and that is what is so disturbing. So if you do nothing else but change the Patriot Act to provide for that,
Right.
then he's right and he's accomplished
That would be
something.
great. Robust collection with better review. That's a
We
way to
don't-
go.
we don't
He's
have
not
it.
arguing for that.
And
He's
I would
arguing for
just-
canceling it.
I would
It's
like to
called
add
compromise.
that often when you collect too much data, you get fewer results, less accurate results because you're overwhelmed with data. And what happens is it becomes easy to then focus on some group that's really not a threat. Oh, let's infiltrate this environmental group because it's easy, as opposed to really having the good intelligence. And we saw that we even had intelligence leading up to 9/11 that we didn't use, that we completely ignored. I mean, flight lessons and all sorts of other things that were very obvious. You didn't need giant, vast, structures in the desert filled with computers to figure out what was going on, and they ignored it.
Rick, you had a strange
I didn't
look on
know
your
where
face.
that went. I got totally lost. How do we go to
So I
giant
think-
things in the
Well,
desert?
what I'm trying to say is the NSA, if every couple of months you see another building that they're building in the desert
I see.
filled
I
with
see.
computers,
I
when
see.
there's very basic information, for example, before 9/11, that the terrorists were taking flight lessons,
Right.
that was completely ignored. So I don't think it's about mass collection. I think it's about smart analysis of good data.
I think hindsight, though, is very convenient.
Right, that's the key.
Nobody knew that they were taking flight lessons so they could take over planes to fly them into buildings. I mean, that
didn't occur to anybody.
Right. No one would have imagined that was a target, which is why you do need to gather large amounts of information.
Maybe it should have occurred to somebody.
Well, in
but it
retrospect,
didn't.
we'll learn for the next time. Where I think you're right, Jane, is that there is a vast difference between data and wisdom. You can collect all the data in the world. If you don't have the wisdom to winnow through it and figure out what's usable and useful intelligence, the data means nothing. So in that sense, I think you're 100% right. Simply having access to huge amounts of facts with no insight about how to work through it is that's not security, that's foolishness. On the other hand, if you don't have the materials to winnow through, that's not security.
So you don't have wisdom, but what if they have the wisdom daily? Then
I knew somebody was going to make the tie.
Of
I should have
course.
known it would be you.
And I appreciate
Little
it. Yeah,
promotion
listen,
for
a
you.
plug
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
wisdomdaily.com is always good, and we do take some of that stuff on. But truthfully, Wisdom Daily, national security, even I'll take national security.
But I mean, should we be giving Rand Paul more credit than we do? I don't think this man's going to be president. But I like that he is willing to stand up there in the Senate tonight and do it the old school way. And I think the old school way is the way. I mean, we've made it way too easy to avoid real filibusters. And I admire him for being willing to get up there and do it. He'll make his point. The newspapers will cover it. We'll all be thinking about the issue in the morning. And that's what we need to do. We need an honest discussion. This is a tough one. There's no easy answer on this one. And I like that he's bringing attention to it. I'm sure he's doing it because it'll help him be president. He thinks it won't. But bless him for doing it anyhow.
And that's our last word. That was almost like a filibuster in its own right. Anyway, coming up next, it's Letterman's last night, and our own Rick Unger goes undercover to the Ed Sullivan Theater. Gets the details. Don't go anywhere.
One of the top box office draws in show business, and besides that, he's a very funny man, and it's a pleasure to have him on our first program. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Murray.
Is it going well? I know this is the first show, and I think this guy needs a little support. Dave Letterman.
The great Bill Murray. That was 33 years ago, 6,027 broadcasts ago. And that was the first late night episode with Bill Murray. David Letterman is calling it a career tonight, believe it or not. His final episode of The Late Show airs tonight on CBS. Letterman inspired a generation of comics with his edgy, irreverent brand of humor, no doubt about that, and signature off-the-wall bits.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for a little something we call Stupid Petrix.
I love you. Sneeze, hurry. Good.
Sleep!
But it wasn't always about laughs. Letterman also helped the nation heal with an emotional monologue in his first show after the 9/11 attacks.
And it's very simple. There is only one requirement for any of us, and that is to be courageous. Because courage, as you might know, defines all other human behavior. And I believe, because I've done a little of this myself, pretending to be courageous is just as good as the real thing.
Hard to believe that was 14 years ago. He basically looks the same, you know. Yeah. Do you think that he's going out too early, or is he picking the right time?
Look, I think he's picking the time that works for him, and you do have to go at some point. I just want to say, what I always loved about David Letterman, I'm a TV geek. It's not that he's a comedian, he's a broadcaster. Mm-hmm. Only a few people have understood how to be broadcasters.
Well, Mr. Letterman's final show, as we said, is tonight. Stephen Colbert will take over in the fall. And the aforementioned Rick Unger, yes, he went to the Ed Sullivan Theater here in New York City to talk to Letterman fans.
It's a beautiful and windy day here in New York City, and as you can see, the crowd is gathering for the final David Letterman show taping forever. No more Dave. We're going to talk to a few people out here, see what they have to say about David hanging it up, and maybe get a little bit of their point of view on what we can expect from Stephen Colbert when he takes over the show in the fall. So tell me your names.
Pam,
Pam?
Pam and Ron.
And where are you from, Pam and Ron?
Vancouver, Canada.
You are going to be a part of television history.
know.
Are you David Letterman fans?
You bet.
You watch
Oh, yeah.
every night?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So what do you think about him hanging it up?
Well,
Well,
it's sad, but, out with the old, in with the new, I guess.
And we're talking with Colleen Friedland
yes,
from
Freeland.
New York City.
That's right.
And are you here for the big final Dave show?
Well, we came in to see if we could see some of the guests going in and out.
Who'd you see?
We saw Jim Carrey, Tina Fey, and I think Julie Louise Dreyfus.
Tell us your name.
It's Eric, ERIC.
And where are you from, Eric, ERIC?
Long Meadow, Mass.
Tell us who some of the people you saw that are going to be on the show tonight.
I saw Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Drew Carey, and the other three people I couldn't recognize at first.
You have a ticket, did you
Yes,
say?
it's right here in my
Oh,
hand.
there it is. Catch that. This is what you want if you want to see the final David Letterman show. Well, I hope you have a great time. Enjoy the show. We've got Jose Perez here from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Welcome, Jose.
Hi, thanks. Nice to be here.
You're obviously a big Dave fan.
I am. You're not going to believe this,
Try me.
okay? But on YouTube, there's a video called David Letterman Meets Jose.
Really?
Yes.
And that's you?
Yes, it is. And over a few years, I've had kind of a over-the-air relationship with him. I've never met him face to face. I've come close. He probably can't stand me, but I love him.
He's going to be gone. We all feel terrible about
We
that.
do.
But we do have Stephen Colbert coming. How do you feel about Colbert as the next host?
He's got big shoes to fill.
What do you think of Stephen Colbert, who will be taking over the show in the fall?
I think that he'll do an excellent job. I am convinced of it.
And if Stephen Colbert doesn't work out, what do you think of Joe Concha as possibly the next host of the show?
Not so sure.
All right, so let me ask you this. If it shouldn't work out for Stephen Colbert,
Okay.
what do you think of Joe Concha to take over the show after Stephen?
I think I might be a better choice.
It all ends tonight, and with that, back to me in the studio.
Who was that woman?
I just talked to them as I found them.
Choice. Okay, well, one question that you asked, let's first talk about the surprise guests. We're no longer a surprise.
Yeah,
right?
I think there's more than that coming.
Okay.
And I suspect they're in the audience, just my guess.
Right.
You know?
It's not like because there's no time to interview them, and you're right. It's more just they'll say like a sentence or two, like a farewell type of thing. But the Mannings, Tina Fey, Jim Carrey. I mean, that's big stuff. But you would expect that from somebody who's been on the air for 33 years.
Right.
Amazing. Stephen Colbert was brought up during that package.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm a huge fan of Stephen Colbert, but he plays a persona,
Right.
and now he's going to have to totally change his act and just be Stephen Colbert. That's quite a...
I contend that CBS, after the initial hype, will be back in third place because they're going with an untested guy in Colbert. Yes, Colbert was on the Colbert Report as a character. I don't know who the real Stephen Colbert is, and with training wheels against Fallon and Kimmel, tough.
We'll see. Don't count him out. Remember that Letterman himself reinvented himself over time. He became different people through the ages. Colbert could do the same. Smart guy.
We'll
Don't count
see.
him
A
out.
lot of competition, that's for sure. Anyway, lots more to talk about. Back with more in a moment. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha with my co-host, Rick Unger, along with Jane Velez Mitchell and Brad Hirschfield. A new program at a New York City elementary school is raising a lot of eyebrows, including my own, apparently. That's because it divides students by race. No, really. Here's a headline in Vox. That's Ezra Klein's outfit. Why a New York City school idea to, temporarily separate kids by race is smart. Under the program launched at the private Fieldstone Lower School, parents get a form asking them to identify their child's race. The school then temporarily separates the students so they can meet in groups to have a frank conversation about their identities and experiences. The students then reunite in a curriculum designed to promote better racial understanding. The program has caused, you can imagine, a lot of controversy, with some parents objecting to students being divided by race, even if it is temporary. But as New York Magazine writes, the school hopes the program will lead to more authentic conversations about race, like at Starbucks a couple of months ago. The article points out that the liberal idea of colorblindness has led to previous generations avoiding race as a subject instead of embracing and learning about our differences. Jane Velez Mitchell,
Yes.
is this a good idea?
I think it's a horrible idea. If I were a parent, I would sue. I'm Puerto Rican and Irish, so, where do I go? And there's such misunderstanding about race. For example, Hispanic isn't race. There are more than 20 countries that are represented by the term Hispanic, and it's of Spain or Latin America.
Can you just say
and there
Latino
are
and
all
generalize it?
races there. My sister's blonde and blue-eyed. And we celebrate that. We have indigenous, we have black, we have Asian, we have white, we have every combination thereof, and that's part of our strength. But people like to say, well, you're Hispanic, you're a race. It's just not true. So I think that beyond that point of my own particular objection to it based on my ethnicity, I object to the idea of trying to reduce people to their race, their skin color. We are so much more than that. And I think it's just a horrible idea and just ill-advised, and just please, just can that.
Before you go on, and that was very passionate, articulate, and lucid, I need you to sit over there. All right, because Brad and Rick are Jewish, so they probably should be together. And then put the Irish. By the way, I'm Irish and Spanish. I had no idea we had kind of that.
Jewish isn't a race.
And talking
It's
about
an
these
ethnic.
categories
that's a very good
and the
point.
way they're both real and not real, you made the best case for doing this. We know the categories of race and ethnicity are fluid, but we can't ignore them. The idea that we're going to be colorblind or gender blind or politics blind, those particularities are what make us us. And remember the school, and I know the school, it's in my neighborhood, is the Fieldston Ethical Culture School. This school has an ancient tradition of trying to create not just kids who know more, but who are better citizens and more civilized. I don't know if they can deliver on the promise, but the idea that you would help people embrace their particularities in order to really become better people and better citizens
I have
is
to ask
brilliant.
you this question. You think it
Brilliant.
would be okay then, because you two are Jewish, to be told to go over here?
Well,
For 45
it's
minutes.
not a race.
First of all, no, I don't care.
Well, but the whole point is, if the logical extension
I'll
of his
answer your
argument.
question.
Yeah.
Yes, if 45 minutes in the course of a week, and by the way, the school was founded, that was the ethical culture movement, by people who simultaneously embraced their Jewishness, but didn't want it to be only about being Jewish. Ethical culture was a movement of largely German Jews who retained fierce pride in their Jewishness, but wanted to be open to people of other religions and ethnicities and races. So this is actually a return to really powerful roots.
Why didn't they include then the religions, if they were going to divide it down?
By the way, I would love to have multiple versions of this. And if you ask me, is more better? Yes. But the fact that more is better doesn't mean we can't start somewhere. I'm sorry. I get the myth of colorblindness was something America needed in the 50s and 60s to launch civil rights. But the next challenge is not to flatten the differences. It's to embrace them and celebrate them, whether they're sexual or religious or ethnic.
But I really have to jump in here, because our whole problem that we've had in our society is reducing everybody to their race or their ethnicity. When I speak to Latino kids, I say, be a Latino professional, not a professional Latino. And I think part of the problem we're having culturally right now is that we are in a divisive society where we're over-defining ourselves by our ethnicity. I'm so many other things. I'm a vegan. I'm an animal rights activist. I'm a lesbian. I'm all sorts of other things
You're
beyond.
anti-big ag.
And I'm anti-big ag.
So I want them all, and here's one thing. This
yeah,
school,
no, go.
$44,000 a year to attend the school.
How
in
much?
Kindergarten, 44 grand.
For what? For kindergarten?
Kindergarten. And only 20% of these kids are on financial aid. I don't mind that, but let's be clear. If they really want to get down and dirty, the real divide will be economic. How does the 20% that gets economic aid feel? But I want them all, which is why you said you're not a professional Latino, but a Latino professional. Be both Latino and professional. Imagine that really great education would teach kids to string together as many of those adjectives as possible and be proud of all of them. They want to start here? Great. Start somewhere.
So
Final word.
Go ahead.
No, you have
No,
it.
I just feel that they then
totally
tell
good to
everybody
let you guys
what
do
are
this.
some of your big criteria. I've just mentioned mine, and then have them form groups on that, not just on the basis of race. I think we overemphasize
Great
race
argument.
in this country.
Tremendous.
Great
You barely
argument.
got in.
You know what? I don't have a
Wow.
strong point of view. These guys had both sides covered.
I just did the math, by the way. It costs $180,000 to go there for 4 years.
Yes, it does.
Good Lord.
That's amazing.
Well,
And imagine the
you know,
shrink bills when you grow up.
I guess they segregate dating sites, right? The J-Date and the Christian Mingle. Why not schools? Anyway, coming up next is Potluck. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. Well, you've got something to say. You can email us now at the Daily Wrap, and that is dailywrap@newsmax.com. Okay, time for Potluck. Rick Unger. You're on camera too. You're up.
You can email us, but you might be subpoenaed if you happen to be a friend of ours. I'm just saying. Okay, here's my question of the day. My question for today is, when is a conservative not a conservative? Now, progressives take a fair amount of guff for sometimes being a little bit hypocritical on the positions that they take, and I accept that. But I saw a story that absolutely amazed me, because as I understand conservatism, and you're all welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, the idea of getting government closer to home is the whole point, right? When you go to the federal government, it's big government putting their heavy hand down on you. Get closer to home. Local government, man, that's where it's at. That is the libertarian way, to be sure, and that's the way the conservatives have always told us that this is the way government can be most effective. So somebody tell me why the governor of Texas yesterday signed into law a bill that removes the opportunity for towns, cities, local government organizations in the great state of Texas to decide for themselves if they want fracking to take place in their town. Now, this all began a few months back, I think it was November of last year, when Denton, Texas decided that fracking was not for them. It just wasn't something that they wanted in their town, and the city council passed an ordinance that banned fracking from the town of Denton. Well, when it comes to oil and gas, apparently, it doesn't work so well for state government. Now, all of a sudden, local government may not be the best thing. So the legislature voted, as we all know, there's a very heavy Republican majority in both houses of the Texas legislature. 2/3 majority in each house, which means it goes into effect immediately. And yesterday, the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, signed it into law. And he actually made a statement, and I'm not making this up, that this will stop the heavy hand of local government from interfering where they shouldn't. The heavy hand of local government. So if the local government has a heavy hand and the federal government has a heavy hand, apparently only state government can rule with a light touch. Now, can somebody here tell me what exactly is conservative about that?
Brad?
I'll give it a shot, although I agree with part of what you're saying. But your argument is a little bit like the guy who jumps out of the 40th story and at floor 29 goes so far, so good. Eventually hits splat, and here's why. It's not that local versus state versus federal. The principle is less government and more direct individual assertion of control. They stepped in, whether rightly or wrongly. I probably agree more with you than with them.
Do you think a local government should have that right?
They should, except if it intrudes on individual exercise of rights. So it's a question of getting things closer and closer to people's ability to determine for themselves what they want. So I'm not saying I agree with the policy,
but it's not
hypocrisy.
Whose individual rights are being affected? The people who now can't take a bunch of money from the oil companies?
Well, that's the argument. I'm not saying I agree, but the argument is yes, if I want to be able to sell the rights to my land to frack, I should be able to. Now, all of it's really just a colossal deflection, because no one, not the left or the right, really want to talk about the only question.
Aren't you a little bit troubled that the governor of Texas, Mr. Tea Party himself, refers to the heavy hand of local
so the
government?
language is silly. He's a politician. I expect is bad. The real issue is to have the real conversation, which is how do you balance the fact to maximize individual liberty and social responsibility? No one wants to do
And
that.
what about the rights of the people who own homes near those fracking sites
don't
not to
want
have a toxic water and not to have their pets, keel over when there's
going up
fracking
and down the
chemicals coming
street.
up? The intense fracking chemicals that are used.
Okay, guys, we have to move on. Unfortunately, that was This is better. We're all suckers for nostalgia, aren't we? We also love good quality. And network TV, well, it ain't what it used to be, really. That said, I call on all network programmers, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, to do more specials like the one we saw 2 nights ago. And that was I Love Lucy. But first, why not show the last episode of MASH once again? You know the kind of ratings that'll do? It was the highest rated of all time. Show the Fonzie episode jumping over the shark in Happy Days, where he keeps on his leather jacket, by the way. It was a 2-part episode. Richie was happy. The Wonder Years. I'd watch that again just to hear the song alone. And how about, there he is. Well, old Fred Savage. Look at that. Looks kind of like me when I was young. And then Cheers, of course. Now, you're saying, Conch, all these are in reruns already, so why would I watch it on network television? Because if you package it like DVDs do, where you get specials, interviews with the cast now, right, behind the scenes kind of stuff. Here's what I know. I Love Lucy, 2 nights ago, they run a regular rerun, right? It did twice the number as the Mad Men finale. 6.2 million people watched I Love Lucy on CBS, Mad Men only 3.3 million. It also beat The Simpsons and Battle Creek and Dateline on the other networks as well. People love nostalgia. So maybe not all those shows, but if you do a Seinfeld, a MASH, or a Cheers the right way, it's easy money. You already own the rights to it. Just spice it up a little bit. Anyway, coming up next, how would you like to be Bill Murray to be a panelist on the Daily Wrap? We'll tell you how. Yeah, it's happy time, people. It's time for Yay or Nay. It's the little game where everybody wins. Did you see MSNBC last night? Well, of course you didn't. That's what we're here for. Anyway, Bill Murray made one hell of an appearance on Lawrence O'Donnell's show when this happened.
Former Saturday Night Live writer and former head writer of the David Letterman show, Jim Downey, and his old office roommate from Saturday Night Live. That is, I think, it looks like Bill Murray. Is that Bill Murray over there? Yeah, that's Bill Murray. We'll be back.
Now, we got a preview of that before we came to commercial, and Rick thought that it was an act.
I think he's
the way he hit his head on that guy's knee. I think he was overserved.
Maybe.
I think which wouldn't be surprising, right? So
the problem is that we saw him drinking like this, a vodka bottle on the David Letterman show, but Letterman was doing it with him, and he doesn't drink.
There's a walk between the Ed Sullivan Theater and 30 Rock, so a couple of bars on the way.
Very short.
Would an overserved Bill Murray make a great panelist on the Daily Wrap? Quickly.
Yes.
Oh, fabulous.
Definitely.
He should host, I would even go as far to say. Anyway, is 65 the new 25? An Israeli woman gave birth to a beautiful and healthy baby boy on Monday. So what's the big deal about that? She's 65 years old. The woman used in vitro. Seems crazy, doesn't it? Well, in Israel, as Brad knows, it's a crime. I didn't know that, actually. She will not be prosecuted. Having a baby at 65, I know you can't physically, Rick, but let's say the girl you're with happens to do that. Would you want to be a dad at 65?
No, but 65 is the new 25.
I've heard that.
I like that part.
You know, we have to stop thinking about parenting as our own biological children. We're going to hit, 9 billion people by 2050? Stop and adopt.
Well said.
I think it's a beautiful story. It's not that it's a crime to be pregnant. They don't do in vitro fertilization over the age of 54 because it's dangerous for the moms and potentially dangerous for the kids. But the idea that after 46 years of childlessness, she wanted to have a child, it's actually pretty beautiful.
The energy. Here's the best part. When that kid graduates high school, mom's going to be 83.
Indeed she will. She'll live and be
How
well.
much would you pay for a hot dog in New York City from a typical street cart? You're looking at $2.25, maybe. Well, one hot dog vendor has upped the price. Here is WNBC in New York.
I asked for a hot dog and a Dr. Pepper, $30. So I was like, you're joking, right?
Wrong. Meet Ahmed Mohammed. He might be the most expensive hot dog vendor in New York.
How much?
Especially if he thinks you're a tourist. Watch as he tries to charge David with a French accent $15 for a hot dog and pretzel.
Yes, hello? No, okay. I can take it back.
And that was Melissa Russo. I used to work with her with that report. The biggest rub, the vendor, Ahmed Muhammad, is ripping off people by ground zero with the $30 hot dogs. $30 for a hot dog?
It's easy. Gray's Papaya, 72nd and Broadway, $1.50, best hot dog in the world.
He's exactly right about
If
that.
you knew where those hot dogs, they'd have to pay you to eat them. A veggie dog next time.
Wow.
He's city regulated. Pull his license. It's illegal. He doesn't display his prices, and he's overcharging. End him.
All right, we are all in agreement on that one. Finally, since we all play basketball here, is this the greatest dunk of all time? He's not a pro or anything like that. That kid's in high school. 6'1". That's called the lost and found. I lost it, I found it. Amazing. Boom, Brad, you dunk. What do you think?
I think it's great, but it's not the greatest. It's not in the game. Go look video. Pogasol from the Bulls. I got that in because they're from Chicago. Do it in game time. That's the greatest dunk, even if it's not as fancy. But it is art.
I agree with you. Dr. J's dunk in the '83 finals against the Lakers.
Perfect example.
Yeah, that's the best one. I wish we had it. We could show it. Jane, you're a big sports
I'm
fan.
going to recuse myself. I know nothing about
You
basketball.
know art. You know
except-
art. Good Lord, let's move on.
It's
Yes.
right. It's right up there. It was ballet. It was beautiful. Loved it.
Incredible. The music set to it was the best part. It was almost like porn basketball you were watching. You know? It was your weird way to watch any show.
That's an image to go out on.
Yep. And it's going to be a 5-day weekend for me. Anyway, panel, great job tonight as always. We really appreciate it. And that will do it for today. Stay tuned for Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayworth. That's next. Good night, everybody.